Hi, this is Erica Merrill, and I'm the founder of Perfect Legal Video. And I'm very excited to bring to you today Attorney Nicole Reeves Lavallee. Nicole is an amazing attorney, and she owns a family law and real estate law practice out in Worcester, Massachusetts. Today, we are going to be talking about a very interesting topic, and that is what you think isn't going to happen when your divorce is done, but does. There are post-divorce issues to deal with in law. And I want to welcome you today, Nicole. I am very interested in what you have to say about what happens after it's supposed to be all over.
Hi, thanks for having me, and hopefully we can learn something that we didn't think about because everyone wants to get rid of their attorney and get rid of their ex at the same time, but that's never the case.
That's why I have you on speed dial, Nicole. Oh, we can be lighthearted about these topics. Let's start with the house. What happens with the house after the divorce?
Again, we're going to start with what does the separation agreement say? But the separation agreement is going to dictate what we're doing with the house. So are we selling it? Are we refinancing? Is one person buying it out? Once we know that based on the separation agreement, then we're going to take a look and we're going to go, okay, so at what point in time does the house have to be in the market? At what point in time does that spouse have to refinance the property? Those are the types of things that we're going to look at. And let me tell you, you better adhere to that schedule. If it says you're going to refinance within 90 days or 120 days, you need to start that now because a refinance is going to take you generally 45 days. If it says you need to list the property for sale within 30 days, you better either have already agreed on a broker or agree on a broker or what that language says in the separation agreement, and let's go from there. But we need to make sure that it's listed. We need to make sure that the house is clean. So somebody's working on something on the house, but we need to look at the agreement and go, okay, who needs to do what? What's the time frame? And more importantly, is it something that I need to do myself or do I need to get my attorney involved?
And that makes a lot of sense. And people, I think through that emotion of the divorce, that's one of the things that they worry about is like, where am I going to live? How are we going to handle this? I've heard people staying together because they don't have the money to buy the other person out. And so they are living in the room down the hall for months. And I mean, have you heard a lot of those sad stories?
I've done a trial where I literally had the parties going to trial and going back to the same house that night. And all I kept thinking was, oh God, please, I don't want to get a call. I don't want to have the police on the phone. Because again, both of them are saying in court, she's a liar, he's a liar, she's a liar, he's a liar. And I'm going, oh, this is going to be a fun night at this household. And thankfully, they didn't end up in court. There was no restraining orders. There was no police involvement. But it was very ick, for lack of a better word, where you're going, oh my God. And they had to do this for a 3-day trial. So every single day they went home to this situation, and every day I held my breath. And the bottom line is, what are we going to do? Somebody needs to keep the house. Somebody needs to sell the house. We can't keep living under the same roof after we're divorced.
Well, right, because what's the point of getting divorced? I mean, if you're in that situation, it's incredibly stressful. It's not good for your health, and it's good to be able to move on for sure. So why don't we talk a little bit about transportation? You were talking about them going to and from the courthouse in the same car to the same house. Are they also splitting that car? What's happening with that?
Again, we're going to start with that separation agreement. What does that say? But again, it's not necessarily that one's getting it. It's, oh, wait, this was jointly owned by husband and wife. There's a loan on the property and I need to get it in my name. How do I do that? Well, again, if you haven't talked to your attorney and haven't worked out those kinks through that, one of the things is going to be, okay, so you need to get a loan to pay off that loan so that we can get a new title. so that once we get a new title, it can be put in your name only. Very similar to what we would do in a refinance of a house, but you still have to go through all those steps. Now, obviously, if you own the property outright, the vehicle outright, then it's really great. Here's the deed, sign the back of it, thank you very much, and you get to walk away. That's the best feeling in the world. But a lot of times we do have those loans. So again, even if we've signed that title over, we still have to take it to the RMV. We still have to get everything taken care of with that. We have to get a new title that comes through. So there's still things that we have to address with. And most importantly, guess what? Have we addressed the insurance? Because so long as your spouse's name is on that vehicle, you want to make sure that they are covered and insured. Because if, God forbid, it's a joint asset and I get in a car accident and my spouse's name is still on it, guess what? Third party is going to sue both of us. So you want to make sure that insurance is still covering both of you so long as you are both owners of that property.
So how do you exchange property? I mean, I think it's difficult. I mean, sometimes things get left behind in the house and you don't even realize they're there for years. You have to call the movers and get them to get it out. But I mean, like, how does it typically happen?
Well, when you're talking about personal property, the ideal goal is, again, does that separation agreement say it? If it doesn't say it, you might not ever get it back. You're really at the mercy of the spouse to be, hey, I don't need your high school yearbook. I don't need this information. Take it. Like, why are you pestering me with it, or throw it out or whatever? But when you have a list of items, you put in the separation agreement, I get, the child's bedroom set and the spare room bedroom set, that's great. One of the things, again, in that separation agreement, if you have a good attorney, is going to articulate exactly when that's going to be done, how it's going to be done. So we're going to pick a time and give you, 2 weeks notice, and it's going to be a block of time for this. And you, as the recipient, is going to make sure you're responsible for the U-Haul or transportation costs. The biggest issue with that is, what's the condition of the property you're going to be receiving? There's no good way to say it, but if you get the furniture back in the best condition, I'm happy for you. That does not happen that often.
Wow. I mean, I know you've got the stories, and it's interesting to think that after everything people go through during a divorce and a separation, that the aftermath is sometimes even worse than when you were going through it. So retirement accounts can really be tricky because they're in both of your names, or in then one of your names, and then one person's taking them over, or maybe one person's taking over part of it. I mean, how do you split those up, and how does that transfer happen?
Unless it's a joint asset that you really can just take somebody's name off of, chances are you're going to have to do it by way of a quadro, which is QDRO or a DRO, but we still call it quadros. And basically what that is that it is an allowance of severing an account as of a date certain, as of an amount certain. We, as the attorneys, usually hire either a third party or we do it ourselves to draft up this quadro. It needs to be approved by your company. So if the bank account that is being held is in Fidelity, it's a retirement account in Fidelity, you're going to go to Fidelity and you're going to say, hey, do you approve this quadro? They're going to look it over and say, nope, we don't like it, send it back. Or they're going to say, yes, we approve it. Now, once they approve it, because that's the hard part right now, then we have to go into court again and file a motion to approve the quadro. So it's just a simple, usually administrative motion that we file with the court. Both parties sign off on it. We submit it to the court approves it. Once the court approves it, then we get that court order back from the court. And then we take both the court order as well as the quadro itself to that third party, being Fidelity in the situation. And we say, hey, please sever this account or divide this account according to what we state. At that point in time, Fidelity will then review it again, make sure it still meets with their criteria, and hopefully they haven't changed it. Once they do that, then they will send out letters to both parties saying, hey, we've approved the quadro. We will send each party notices about what their procedures are. And then the recipient, so if you're the recipient, you would get a letter from Fidelity saying, hey, I've got this money in this 401k. What do you want me to do with it? You have to either liquidate it or roll it over into something else. And then you as the recipient is going to say, hey, put it in this account, or hey, put it in this, or can I leave it in the same account? Fidelity or that company is going to tell you whether or not it can stay in the same account it is in, or if it has to go into a different account. I'm not going to go into any of those details because, again, the company is going to determine it, the type of account it is, if it's a retirement account, an annuity, a 401k, all of those things have different ways as to what's going to happen after the quadro is done. But essentially, you're going to get something that says, I have this new account, and then you get to do what you want with it according to what that company will allow.
Oh my God. That sounds like a very long, arduous process. How long does it typically take?
The hardest part is getting a quadro approved. I have somebody that literally we just got it approved this week. It's very exciting because we're going into court in 2 weeks. But it was 9 months. And that's kind of a long end of it. When you have government employees, so firefighters and policemen, generally those are really quick turnovers. Sometimes Fidelity's the best. Fidelity is by far the easiest to deal with, but then you deal with all these other companies. And those take a little bit longer and they take a little bit more to do. General time frame is, I'm going to say, probably 6 months to 9 months after your divorce is final, because again, we're going to be looking at what the language says. Most language is going to say we're going to divide this account as of the date absolute. So you're still waiting that 90-day period till your divorce is final, and then we can start the process. And then of course, once we get the approval of it, in terms of going into court and getting it approved, generally 3 to 4 weeks maximum, depending on how quickly the attorneys are working on it. And then again, we go back to that company and we go, hey, hello, do something about it. And again, we're at their mercy. So generally speaking, that is usually another 6 to 8 week turnover.
So that takes quite a while. Can we talk about life insurance? Now, life insurance is pretty tricky. I know that in some cases, you're told that you need to actually maintain a life insurance policy for a certain amount of time to cover any alimony or child support that you may have to pay to someone, just to make sure that if something happens to you, they still get the money that they're relying on. How does it typically work?
That is correct. So generally, again, we're going to look at that same separation agreement. It's either going to say you're going to maintain it, which means you probably already have the policy in place, and we probably already agreed to the amount that's already in place. But again, let's say we don't have it. We're going to look to that agreement, and it's going to say you're going to obtain a policy within X amount of days, usually 60 to 90 days. We don't want to push that one out any longer. But then it's going to be, okay, now that you've got that policy, show it to your ex. Or the alternative is, show me why you got a denial. There are cases where we know, he's tried before, and, he's one of those high risk people that really $100,000 policy is going to cost him an insane amount of money per year. We're going to go, okay, well, maybe we ask for the denial. Maybe we ask for that information. There are certain circumstances where we're going to ask for them to do that every year until such time that we either get a reasonable amount, or, at some point the party's going to say it's not worth it. So, you're going to have those certain circumstances, but generally speaking, the recipient of the life insurance is going to be the former spouse, which always kind of makes people ultra twitchy. What do you mean I have to put my ex on my life insurance? He's going to benefit when I die? Yes, he's going to benefit because you can't pay child support and your child needs the support. Okay. But I have to list him. Can I list a trust? No. And so a lot of the times we get in that situation where we're going to give it to the spouse unless we have established a family trust, and maybe both parties are going to put it into that trust itself. But generally speaking, you're leaving it to that spouse for the benefit of either that spouse in terms of alimony or for the children.
In those cases, just like a little side question here, do people typically set up a trust? how does that work?
They can set up a trust. Again, it has to be something that the parties agree to, and what the separation agreement says. But I have seen parties where they've established a trust and they obviously wanted to go into that trust because they've already allocated those funds. They've already said, hey, look, if our child needs a guardian or if the child is having some issues that we as parents can't take care of them, then this is how the money's being allocated. It's very hard to do after the fact. For you to just say that I'm going to universally or unilaterally put it on as a trust that I've created after the fact, you better get your ex's consent. Because if they don't know what that trust says, they're probably thinking, hey, you're trying to screw me out of the money. And guess what? You may very well be doing that, in which case, then the estate is going to be sued at the time of your death.
Wow. And you do hear about that. So that is a lot to think about. There's a lot of moving parts. So this has got to be the time where I say, if you are having any issues, you want Nicole to look over something, even if you've already gone through the divorce, it never hurts to have a fresh set of eyes on your situation and make sure that everything was done properly and that you have all of your bases covered. Because even in this very short interview, you can see that there are so many things that can go wrong later on if you don't get your divorce decree done the right way and you don't get everything decided on. That's just putting it in the most basic manner that I can. But seriously, we're talking catastrophic, hundreds of thousands of dollars at times. That is what it can cost you if you don't do it right the first time. So let's talk about the will. How do you change your wills? Do you have a separate will now? Has nothing to do with your ex anymore. I know you're smiling at me because I need to sign off on my last will.
That wasn't the reason why I was doing that. But that's one of those things that everyone seems to forget about. If you get the forms at the courthouse, and this is what makes me twitchy, so you get the forms at the courthouse because you want to save money and you want to do it yourself and you're going to check off those little boxes. Guess what? Chances are you don't change your will, your spouse still gets it. 5, 10, 15 years later, your spouse is still getting everything because that's what your will said. Those are the things that make me want to kill myself because really, guys, you're getting divorced. You don't want this person in your life. Make sure all of the documentation is taken care of. And guess what? A will is going to do that. Now, the good part is most attorneys are going to put in their separation agreements language that says, hey, once our divorce is final, you get nothing of my estate. But again, if you use forms that are done by bad attorneys or with these checkoff boxes, that language is not going to be in there. So you run the risk of, hey, I keel over tomorrow and my spouse is getting everything that I earned after the divorce. Oh my God, tell me you won't be rolling over in your grave. So simple fact of the matter is get a new will regardless of what the documents say, because that's the best way to protect yourself. At the end of the day, you want to make sure, hey, look, maybe I left the kids with the guardian that A has passed away, or B, it's my ex's mother and oh my God, I didn't want it in the first place and I certainly don't want it now. You want to make sure that you have those changes in your will, you have those updates, because guess what? Again, those things are going to control. So maybe we can exclude the spouse, but maybe we can't exclude the guardians or all those other issues. So we want to make sure we look at the whole picture and look at every single clause in there to make sure that it's up to date. And again, it's not only the will, but what about a power of attorney? What about a healthcare proxy? Just because he's your ex doesn't mean that goes away. So any estate planning, you need to make sure that that's updated and changed, because again, we can address the will if your attorney does it right, but the healthcare proxy and the power of attorney are never affected in a separation agreement. So get those updated as well.
That is so interesting. And we went through the process of redoing my will, or actually, I'll admit it was my first will, and my ex and I never even did a will, but it doesn't mean that he wouldn't get things if I died, just because he might still be considered the next in line. but and it's very interesting when you go through that process, because you were so funny. Like, you're killing people off. Okay, what if this person's dead? What if that person's dead? What if you can't make decisions for yourself? Do you want your ex there deciding whether they're going to pull the plug? Or I mean, it is very interesting, because you either are incapacitated or you're dead, and you will have no say over what happens. And I know of a couple of instances in my own family where there was bad blood between siblings, like my Nana, who has passed away, and her brother hated each other. He died, left everything to his wife. They didn't really have a will. His wife died, everything went to her, and he would have been rolling in his grave. And there just weren't that many people left once you get a certain age, for your money to go to. So it definitely discuss this with your attorney, because think about how you would feel if your children or your grandchildren didn't get the assets that you wanted them to get, because all of a sudden they went to your sibling that you didn't want to have it, or your ex. I mean, there are some really heartbreaking situations, and it's just because people didn't get their paperwork done.
That's very true. And I think, one of the big issues is exactly what you just said. So you die, your daughter gets everything. Great. Who's getting custody of your daughter? Oh, wait, that's your ex. So who's indirectly getting all of your assets? Your ex, unless you have a will. Then you can allocate those funds to a trust to be dispersed at a date and time certain that you want it to be, not with your ex's paws in the cookie jar and going, oh, I'm going to take this now, I'm going to take this now, I'm going to take this now. Make sure it goes to the right person. And again, in most divorces, you have those children. That's why you want the will to be there. That's why you want it to be correct, because you don't want somebody else to come in and swoop in and take that money.
So you mentioned a healthcare proxy, and I touched on it when I was just talking about all the things that can go wrong. What about a healthcare proxy? People don't even think about this. They just think about death. They never think about things happening to you right now when you're young and in your prime that keep you from working or being mentally capable of making decisions for yourself and your children. I mean, what happens with the healthcare proxy?
Well, healthcare proxy is going to take care of any medical issues. So they're only going to address medical issues. But again, I mean, God forbid I get in a car accident, I have brain trauma, they have to put me in an induced coma. Guess what? Can't make medical decisions because I'm in a coma. Who's going to make those decisions for me? So you really run the risk of, there's a lot of cases where this happens more often than not. I mean, right now, again, you hear it all the time with COVID is, oh, well, this person was in a coma for 3 months, for 5 months. Okay, well, who's making those decisions on their behalf? It happens more often than not. And coma is probably the easiest one, because it is one of those times where you're going, hey, we really can't have that person make that decision. It's not a question of competency. We just can't get them to talk. Versus, hey, this person has Alzheimer's and they're in and out and we're not really sure. There's a little bit of difference. It's in a little bit of gray area, but who's going to make those medical decisions on your behalf? The durable power attorney is going to be who's going to make the financial decisions on your behalf. Guess what? You still have bills to pay. Do you want to lose your house into foreclosure? You want to get evicted from your house because you can't make those decisions because you're in that coma and you don't have somebody that's being able to write the checks for you? Those are going to come into play again whenever you're incompetent, and they're going to allow some third party to write those checks out on your behalf.
I mean, well, this has been a lot of information, and, really, I want to encourage anyone out there that has questions about any of the many topics that we could certainly do a full day on. Some of the things you talked about, it's a nice short overview, but these situations get complicated, and, really give Nicole's office a call if you have any questions, because they are just excellent at what they do. She has a wonderful staff, and she herself is very empathetic and has incredible strategies to help you through whatever your particular situation is. It's never just a cookie cutter thing. especially when it comes to divorce and breakups and, what are the next steps to living a happy life, like making sure that all those things happen in accordance to the way that you want them to happen. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we go? I know we've kind of covered a few topics that we discussed ahead of time, but you never know what comes up during the interview.
I think the biggest issue I want to say is if you have an attorney and you just got divorced and they say, okay, you're done, here you go away, that should kind of be a red flag. Maybe you do need to have somebody else look at that, because again, I have yet to see in 20 years of practice, I can count on the number of hands, how many times something has happened where it's done and over with. That's, hey, we've got no assets, we've got no kids. Everything's already in your own respective names. It doesn't happen that often. There's usually some follow-up. And again, the question is, if your attorney is turning you away, you got to be concerned that, is this the right thing? Am I really all set? Because I can see so many times where I've had people come into me and go, I'm supposed to get a retirement account from my ex, but I don't know if that's ever been done. And I go and I look at their agreement and they got divorced 10 years ago. What? And then I look it up in the docket and there's no quadro file. Okay, you realize you're never going to get this money. I've had people actually die. And then we go, oh, wait, we're supposed to get that money. Great, guys, there are things that need to be done. So again, when an attorney says, okay, you're all done, and walk away, you really have to kind of shake your head and go, but is it really? And it's just maybe that, again, you have that simple, quick, easy divorce, but maybe not. So you want to make sure that you understand exactly what you need to do after the divorce and who you need to talk to about each of those items.
I think that is sage advice. And as always, we absolutely appreciate your taking the time out to discuss these issues with us so that you have a heads up on what you really need to be taking care of. Because you don't know what you don't know. And unfortunately, just because you don't have the information doesn't mean that it's not going to bite you in the butt later. So I want to thank everyone for watching. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And thanks again, Nicole, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Have a great weekend, everybody, and we'll see you next time.